Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 506, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 6, An Intro to Denial, The Critical Degree of Ignorance. The podcast objectives are reveal the critical degree of ignorance, reveal how one falls into a state of denial, analyze the progression of ignorance, and analyze how denial causes you to lose touch with reality. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us, for these are troubling times and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. A union of thoughts and intentions. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 442 of our exposition on lawlessness. Recently, we began our analysis of the focal degree of ignorance. Enter error. Now, as I mentioned, for much of last week, error is the deadliest degree of lawlessness we have analyzed thus far, which is proven by the fact that error has the power to neutralize your girdle of truth, and thus the following is true. By neutralizing your girdle of truth, error has the power to deactivate the whole armor of Elohim, which will ensure that you will not succeed in spiritual warfare. Now, this speaks to why error also has the power to destroy assemblies. For by infecting one member with error, he will infect two, then 10, and then 20. And he will continue until he has infected them all. Here is how. Every member of an assembly is spiritually yoked, which, by spiritual definition, implies a union of thoughts and intentions. No doubt, this is why we were commanded not to be unevenly yoked with false believers, for their false beliefs will become our false beliefs, and their bad intentions will become our bad intentions, and the spiritual force driving it all is error. Now, this being the case, it should be quite clear that whatever comes next will be a spiritual doozy. To wit, seeing as error is the deadliest degree of lawlessness we have analyzed thus far, the degree that follows will be at least equally as deadly. And trust me, it is. And we will begin analyzing this degree of lawlessness in today's podcast. Enter denial, the critical degree of ignorance, and the fourth of the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness. Let's get started. They are in denial. Now, as it is my custom, I will begin this analysis by providing a definition for denial to ensure we are considering this degree of lawlessness from a uniform spiritual perspective. By definition, denial is a refusal to admit the truth or reality of something because it is unpleasant or unbearable to the subject. Now, bearing this in mind, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: how could one conclude that the truth is unpleasant or unbearable? The answer is sure. It is because they are operating in error, which is why error precedes denial and the progression of ignorance. My dear friends, just think about it. If you are wearing the girdle of truth and you allow it to purge your beliefs of all the errors you inherited and all the errors you acquired, you will reach a point where it becomes easier for you to identify all the errors. Now, that said, the inverse must be true. Vis-a-vis, if you are not wearing the girdle of truth, or if you are not wielding it as you are led by the set apart spirit, you will incur the opposite reality. Consider this: all the errors you inherited and all the errors you acquired will be harder for you to identify. Now, that was the inflection. Here is the problem. To wit, the harder it becomes for you to identify the error, the longer it will take for you to eliminate the error. Likewise, the longer it takes for you to eliminate the error, the harder it will be to eliminate. This is precisely why many who heard the message of restoration never responded. It is because they are in denial. To wit, the truth and our reality is extremely difficult for them to accept. Not only this, but the majority who did respond only responded in part, for they too are in denial concerning the parts of this message they don't want to follow. In either case, these false believers value the error over truth and reality. Perhaps now you can see why I have constantly referred to the girdle of truth throughout this exposition, and I will continue to do so as we continue in our analyses of the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness. Here is why. Your ability to wield the girdle of truth is evidence that you value the truth. And if you value the truth, you will never be led into error. And thus, the inverse is true. Those who are led into error are men and women who do not value the truth. The progression of ignorance. Now, by linking error to denial, we have completed the progression of ignorance. The cycle is as thus: by disregarding the truth, i.e., the parts you don't want to follow, you begin to stumble at the truth, which leads to error. From there, as you walk in the error of your ways, your mind and your heart become hardened. And thus, when you are confronted with truth, you will deny the truth for the simple but sure fact that you can't handle the truth. Now, I have captured the progression of ignorance in the table below. I encourage you to pause the video and take a few moments to review. Now, the first thing you likely notice is that the progression of ignorance is linked with the progression of deception. If you recall, the association between ignorance and deception is parallel to prejudice and contempt and disobedience and doubt. Along these lines, deception is the enemy nation and ignorance is the invading army, which is why their progression begins with ignorance. For that reason, we will update this table in real time as we analyze the degrees of deception in the upcoming weeks. The next thing you likely notice is that the progression of ignorance and deception is equal to the progression of disobedience and doubt. And thus, it is clear that ignorance and deception are also designed to corrupt and conquer your mind. And this should come as no surprise. To wit, ignorance is clearly a spiritual disease of the mind. Remember, ignorance is a lack of knowledge, learning, information, understanding, and or awareness. And these are all outputs of your thought dimension, specifically your mind. Outside the boundaries of truth and reality. Now, the progression of ignorance begins with the questioning, which is aligned with disregard. Along these lines, when you begin questioning any facet of Yahuwah's will, you will eventually disregard his will. We know this because anyone who believes in the will of Elohim will never question it. For the man who questions Elohim is the man who doubts Elohim. Now, the questioning leads to withdrawal, the same way disregard leads to error. Along these lines, when you withdraw from Yahuwah's will, you will begin to err concerning his will. For how can a man walk in the truth of Yahuwah's will and at the same time not be in Yahuwah's will? Moving on, withdrawal leads to opposition the same way error evolves into denial. Along these lines, if you oppose Yahuwah's will, you will eventually deny his will. We know this because denial, by definition, is a common and natural response to opposition. To wit, most men by nature will resist any belief that opposes their perspective and or reality. Along these lines, denial is a defense mechanism in which confrontation with a problem or reality is avoided by denying the existence of the problem or reality. This is evidence that denial thrives off of fear, and fear originates in the mind. Ergo, as we progress our analysis of the impact of ignorance and deception, you will find that ignorance and deception do even more damage to your mind than disobedience and doubt. And after all you learned in phase one, that is saying a lot. Now, this is largely due to the impact of denial. For all who are infected with this spiritual virus are out of touch with reality. And although they may not realize it, this is exactly where Satan wants them. Here is why. It is impossible to experience any model of salvation outside of the boundaries of truth and reality. No doubt, Satan knows this. Ergo, he invests a great deal of time and effort in this enterprise, for he knows it doesn't matter how much progress you have made in your quest. Denial will stop you dead in your tracks. And then it will push you all the way back to the foundation of lawlessness. There, the enemy will subject you to all the strongholds you once defeated and the master stronghold that controls them all. Now, here is the final word. Reality and truth will be on trial if you operate in denial. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, I have told you once and I'll tell you again. Ignorance is the deadliest degree of lawlessness as it relates to spiritual blindness. And now you know why. It is because the progression of ignorance ends with you operating outside of the truth and out of touch with reality. And this, my friends, is why ignorance is the primary application of deception and a primary driver of spiritual duality. Heretofore, I recommend lean not unto your own understanding, but on the truth you must rely. For the man who does not rely on the truth will be deceived and believe a lie. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 506, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 6. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 507, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 7. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.